ChatGPT Plus is free for college students through May. Here's the thing. You've got a lot to do between now and then. Studying for finals, writing papers, trying to keep your life on track. And ChatGPT can help with all of it. It can quiz you for your econ exam, make a study guide from your French notes, plan out your meals and study breaks. It can get really specific on how you like to learn. It can even help you come up with ways to stop procrastinating. So from now until summer break, take advantage of all the ways ChatGPT can make your life easier. Restrictions apply.
It's The Other Side of Midnight with Frank Morano.
Well, I'll tell you, if you're a parent in this country, one thing I think you have to be wishing for is for our education system to improve. A lot of people have different solutions on how to improve the education system in this country. But the one thing that I haven't heard anybody saying is that, oh, no. The education system is working just fine. Keep the schools exactly the way they are. Don't touch them. We're the envy of the world. I think there was a time in American history where that was said, but it is no longer. So that's why this op-ed in the Wall Street Journal a week or so ago really caught my attention, because it had to do with an idea that we've heard before to abolish the Department of Education. The headline of the piece was Department of Education, a bad idea whose time has gone. And its author is somebody that is no stranger either to education advocacy, to the classroom where she's been a professor, or really any aspect of education. She's also no stranger to the world of politics and policy making. I'm very, very pleased to welcome to the program longtime education advocate and the former majority leader of the California State Senate. She's also been a co-founder of Explore Academy Charter Schools, Gloria Romero. Dr. Romero, it's great to have you on the program. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you. It's good to be with you and your listeners.
So I don't want to spend too much time on politics, because education is something that I think everybody's concerned about, irrespective of their politics. But obviously, your whole career in the California state legislature, you were elected as a Democrat. You made a lot of headlines this year with your decision not only to back President Trump, but to actually become a Republican. What gives? Why would a lifelong Democrat choose not only to back Trump, but to switch parties?
Well, there are a number of reasons for that. And I would say that I would not be joining the Republican Party if this were a party headed by Mitt Romney or, Paul Ryan. But Donald Trump is very different. I think he has built a coalition that involves and puts first working class Americans. He has built essentially a new rainbow coalition, growing his numbers with people across stripes and ethnicities overall. But the thing that really moved me was, as a Democrat before, just seeing essentially a political coup take place right in front of our eyes in full view of the world, when 14 million votes were just thrown out by political operatives in a backroom deal, and then a candidate was installed, and we were told just to shut up and vote. This was something that I had been looking at already to say, this is no longer a party that represents me. I don't recognize it anymore. And I've been almost a lifetime Democrat, but I saw that happening in the Democratic Party, completely catering to woke interests and to the elites of this country. And on the other hand, I saw Donald Trump really championing working people, America first, dealing with the economy, inflation, immigration, and education, advocating for school choice, something that I have spent my life advocating for as well.
Yeah, I think, you're really speaking for not only me, but a lot of other people that don't necessarily come from a Republican background that were kind of inspired to do something differently given the current bizarre alignment with the major parties these days. All right, before we get to your op-ed in the Wall Street Journal, which I enjoyed very much, in general, what's the problem with education in America these days?
Well, we call it a public education system, but it has become a public works program. And that is that it's designed for the adults who work the system, the paychecks, the pensions, the perks, everything that goes with the adults in the system and basically forgetting about the kids in the system. The sad thing is that special interests have overrun it. And today, if we take a look at not only the federal government, but here in California, where I happen to be, the teachers' unions are really the number one political donors to the Democratic Party. And that then means that failing schools are allowed to be kept open, that there are no changes. I mean, reasonable changes, such as including meritocracy, including a review of tenure, so that you don't just get a job for life if you show up and breathe. It becomes impossible to fire a teacher, even if that person has molested students in the classroom. It's gone totally woke, and essentially then education is something that is subsidiary to the interests of the adults who make money off the system.
In terms of your proposal, well, which others have talked about, including President Trump as well, to essentially abolish the Department of Education, this may seem counterintuitive to a lot of parents listening or grandparents that are concerned about education. They may think, wait a minute. If we're concerned about education, why wouldn't we bolster and support the Department of Education rather than abolish it? Explain the rationale behind getting rid of the Department of Education.
Well, remember that we have not always had a Department of Education at the federal level. This was created by then President Jimmy Carter in 1979, and actually it was a handout to the very powerful national teachers unions who wanted him to create a department. You do not need a federal bureaucracy that has become very, very bloated in order to deliver and have a great education system. So by abolishing a federal bureaucracy, part of the downsizing, essentially the responsibility for education is being returned to the states. And the states are a more local level by which parents can have access to their local school boards, their state officials, et cetera. And at the state level, the state elected officials can no longer point the finger and say, oh, golly gee, we just have to do what Washington says and we're limited. You know, the responsibility is borne by the states. In addition, there are numerous responsibilities that currently are assigned to the department that can be handled elsewhere. For example, when we're talking about, civil rights violations that might occur within a school district, these can be aptly handled by, for example, the Department of Justice, or perhaps the Department of Treasury might take on the issue of repayment of student loans, looking at privatization as well. So you don't need a middleman. The founding fathers did not write into the Constitution a Department of Education. That was created along the lines, and basically it has ballooned to such an extent that at one point we believe that we had something like only 65 to 70 cents of every federal dollar going to the classroom, with some, over 50,000 people and cottage industries that have cropped up, basically just doing reports to Congress. So it's basically busy work. But the job of education, it's failed. And when we take a look at where the national numbers are today, when we take a look at the most recent scores, only 31%, think about that, only 31% of eighth graders are proficient in reading. Wow. And it's even worse for math. So a federal department isn't working. Let's, eliminate it, return the obligations to the state, and shine the light there where really it does belong.
At 30 minutes after the hour, this is The Other Side of Midnight. My guest is Gloria Romero. Dr. Romero, how do you address concerns that some states may lack the capacity or even the political will to improve education independently? My state may do it really well. Your state may not do it so well. What do you say to that argument that without a federal clearinghouse or federal, guidepost for how to improve education standards, that some states are going to exceed, others are going to fall further behind?
Well, that is the critical issue, and there are debates and arguments about them, and I think that they are valid concerns overall. So even by eliminating a department, it does not mean that we have to eliminate some type of a clearinghouse accountability. There can be, for example, some type of legislative audits that can be monitored to make sure that states are basically educating the children. But ultimately, I would side with the fact that, in this type of a system, this republic that we have, that it really is a state obligation. And right now, the federal Department of Education is really it's only a small percentage overall of the total allocation of dollars that go to the state. The monies can be continued to be spent where they are wise, but basically those responsibilities and accountability are handled by the state. We think we would be eliminating the bureaucracy, the administration of that, so that you can allow any dollars that are spent by the federal government to the state to really be used for educating kids in the classroom and not basically hiring more adults in the system to write compliance reports that nobody reads.
You highlight Arizona's education savings accounts as a success. Before reading your piece, I was unfamiliar with education savings accounts. Is this basically just school vouchers, or is there a different aspect of this than what we traditionally know school vouchers to be?
Well, people use different terms overall. And for me, I am in support of school choice, whether you call it a voucher, whether you call it an opportunity scholarship, whether you call it an education savings account. The bottom line is this. Look, education is the key to the American dream. It's what lifts one out of poverty. And yet we find, for example, here in California, and I know across the country, we typically find that kids are assigned to a school by zip code. It just so happens, whatever address you are, some bureaucrat assigns you to a school. Now, the problem is that when the state identifies that school as chronically underperforming, oftentimes with some of the least competent, the least experienced teachers in the system that are then protected by the teachers' contracts that are negotiated, which ensures that some of the most needy kids don't have the quality services that are mandated. But the kids have to stay there because of zip code. You are not free to leave. And so what the Arizona program does and others is to basically say that the parents who are paying their taxes already, that the money, instead of going to a district, it goes to the parents in the form of a savings account, a portion of it, a certain amount of money that then that parent can use to say, hey, maybe I'm going to hire tutors, or maybe I'm going to transfer them into even a private school whereby I can use some of this money to pay for tuition. There are different ways that the laws are written, but it basically gives the parents a greater voice in choosing the school that works for them. And that way the kids are not just stuck in a failing school, even when the state identifies it as failing and hasn't done anything for years to turn it around or transform it.
Home means something different to everyone. But with Rocket Mortgage, home can mean even more. It can mean a college education, taming your high-interest debt, even a renovation. We've made it easier than ever to use your home equity. That home you worked so hard for, now it can work hard for you. Call 800-4ROCKET or visit rocket.com to find out more.
Rocket Mortgage, LLC, licensed in all 50 states. NMLSConsumerAccess.org, number 3030.
The number one selling product of its kind with over 20 years of research and innovation. Botox Cosmetic, out of botulinum toxin A, is a prescription medicine used to temporarily make moderate to severe frown lines, crow's feet, and forehead lines look better in adults.
Effects of Botox Cosmetic may spread hours to weeks after injection, causing serious symptoms. Alert your doctor right away as difficulty swallowing, speaking, breathing, eye problems, or muscle weakness may be a sign of a life-threatening condition. Patients with these conditions before injection are at highest risk. Don't receive Botox Cosmetic if you have a skin infection. Side effects may include allergic reactions, injection site pain, headache, eyebrow and eyelid drooping, and eyelid swelling. Allergic reactions can include rash, welts, asthma symptoms, and dizziness. Tell your doctor about medical history, muscle or nerve conditions including ALS or Lou Gehrig's disease, myasthenia gravis, or Lambert-Eaton syndrome, and medications, including botulinum toxins, as these may increase the risk of serious side effects. For full safety information, visit BotoxCosmetic.com or call 877-351-0300.
See for yourself at BotoxCosmetic.com.
At Sephora, we've got what you want because you're obsessed with your skin, and we're obsessed with what it needs. Sephora has the best products to help you get beautiful, glowing, radiant skin. With an extensive, inclusive range of results-driven formulas and in-store beauty advisors to help you find exactly which are right for you, the best skincare is only at Sephora. Sephora, for all your skincare.
This episode is brought to you by Factor. Optimize your nutrition this year with Factor, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal service. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are dietitian approved, ready to eat in just 2 minutes. Choose from 40 weekly options across 8 dietary preferences like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, and Keto. Eat smarter at factormeals.com/listen50 and use code listen50 for 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. Factormeals.com/listen50, code listen50. T's and C's apply.
If folks are just tuning in, this is The Other Side of Midnight. I'm Frank Morano. We are talking education with Gloria Romero. Whenever the idea of something like education savings accounts or school vouchers come up, the people that are opposed to them point to the fact that as they see it, this drains resources from traditional public schools. How do we ensure that these programs, whatever we want to call them, don't undermine the public education system in whatever state or whatever municipality they're tried in?
If a district is doing a good job, there's no reason for a parent want to pack up and leave. So I would always start there. Where's the responsibility and the accountability? The problem is that we know that many school districts are not doing the right thing. Again, from California, I'll give you an example overall, and especially looking at African American and Latino children. In California, 70% of African American kids in California are not reading at basic levels of proficiency. 70%. I mean, that is absolutely crazy. And there is still the obligation for those kids to attend a school that obviously is failing in its mission to provide an education for the children. So when I look at this, I think the kids do not belong to a school district. I have no affinity for a particular school district. That's brick and mortar. It's a bunch of bureaucrats and adults and well-paid superintendents. The ones who pay the price are the parents who are already paying taxes for a district to deliver. And yet, when you keep seeing generationally and for decades that the schools are not turning around, there is a problem there because we know how to teach and we have alternatives. You mentioned that I'm a co-founder of Explore Academy, and charter schools are not always the answer, but they're part of a portfolio, a toolkit that parents can say, hey, I'd like to use this one. I'd like to try this. But what we are finding overall is then when you introduce some competition, when you introduce something like an alternative, like a charter school, we are finding overall that kids, same income levels, same backgrounds, are doing better. They are closing the achievement gaps and they are succeeding at the rate that we want them to be succeeding. So we know that alternatives are there, but the question really is choice. And I think it's something where, if we believe that, ultimately parents are the ones responsible for their children, then we should empower the parents to make the best choice. And it might mean saying, adios, goodbye to the local school district that I normally go to, and I'm going to go across town. or I'm going to go to a Catholic school, or I'm going to homeschool. I'm going to do what I wish to do for the education of my child. If we're going to hold parents accountable, and I believe we need to, parents need to be the first teachers, but then we have to give them the choice and the responsibility to actually parent and be the architects of their children's educational futures.
If you had your druthers, what metrics would you use to measure the success of states in managing education independently? Would the federal government retain any role in holding states accountable?
Well, it depends on how it gets set up. Remember, these would be grants that would be, block grants that would be sent to the states overall. But similar to the debate about immigration, for example, right now that's going on, where we are hearing the new borders are basically telling states across the country, look, if you are not going to assist us in the deportation of criminals, undocumented, out of the states, then basically we will consider whether or not we withhold funding. So you do have that leverage there that can be withheld. If you don't comply with the rules, you're not going to get the block grant. And let's see how quickly many of the states will get into line to say, okay, we want the money, so we will comply with those regulations and rules that are drawn up. There can also be legislative oversight, like an accountability office. We're talking about the DOJ, right, headed by Elon Musk and Vivek, and I would love to see them come up with some type of an accounting system. Across the country, it's not atypical to walk into a restaurant and you'll see a grading, A through D in California. And if it's an A, you go in. It's a good restaurant. A B, maybe something went wrong, but you don't want to go below a C. And if it's a D, the health department comes in and they shut it down. Well, why can't we have something like that at the national level so that parents get a glimpse? But the problem is that these are obscured. So you can find different ways in which there can be accountability, measurement. I believe in data. I believe in looking at it, using it to assess the quality of the educational services and the advancements that are made in closing the gaps that we've seen accrue over many years of neglect of some of our most vulnerable students and having a chance to turn it around. So there will always be a role for the federal government, but that doesn't mean you have to have an entire department dedicated to education. And again, it puts the responsibility back on the states where I believe it belongs and which existed prior to 1979 when Jimmy Carter created the department essentially as, I would say, payback for them supporting him to become president.
Obviously, I live in New York City, but we have a lot of listeners in Chicago as well. And the people in those cities, as a lot of listeners around the country can probably attest, bureaucracy is not something that is unique to the federal government. New York City and Chicago have bureaucracies in many different governmental departments, but especially in education, that could rival many large countries. Forget about small countries, large countries. If the Department of Education is dismantled, wouldn't the states and the local districts still need some sort of bureaucratic structures to manage compliance with state-level mandates? And wouldn't that potentially create just a similar issue at a smaller scale?
Well, I would say, right now it's not working. I mean, remember I gave you those statistics on where we are as a nation. If we're happy with 31% of our kids at basic levels of proficiency, then we can all just keep the same old money flowing the same way. This is intended to disrupt, to shake up the system, to try something different. And I believe that cutting out the bureaucracy, sending it back to the states, and then saying, okay, states, you are now responsible for this. But it does mean, and you're right, it does mean that we, the voters, we, the people, need to take a more active role in this. But it's virtually impossible to find somebody in Washington, D.C. Like, who am I going to go talk to? Does anybody even know who the Secretary of Education happens to be. And if you do, I will guarantee you, you're never going to get him on the telephone. Okay, you're going to be dealing with some low-level bureaucrat intern who takes the message and doesn't return your call unless you have money to contribute to the president at this point. So it brings it back to the states where I believe it belongs in our form of government. It still means that we have a problem at the state level. I gave you California statistics, and across the country. I mean, Chicago is a nightmare. New York, I follow it with great interest because I'm very excited about many of the charter schools that operate in New York, like Success Academy, for example, very, very influential and very powerful in terms of closing gaps, but also you find the decay within the system itself. So is it ever finished? No, but I believe that it becomes, you're removing a layer and you're bringing up the possibility then of saying, let's have greater output from our state agencies so they can no longer just point a finger. For example, special education students. In California, we find that the easiest excuse to say, well, we're not closing the gaps in this special ed students are not advancing in proficiency because of, and then they go on to point the blame at Washington, D.C. By eliminating this, you're saying, oh, no, you're not going to get away with that. Special education is an obligation of the state. The federal government, because of a whole number of compacts, litigation that was initiated some time ago, participated in the education of special ed students. But ultimately, it goes back to the states to say, these are your students. You must provide for the funding in your own budget to acknowledge and make sure that all kids, including special education students, are advancing as well. So basically, you're removing the excuses. But it is ever vigilant. Education is to me, it's always been the number one issue. And that's why I have dedicated my life in fighting for education reform and finally just walking away from the Democratic Party that just said, give lip service to education, but basically trap kids in schools that are failing. And if there are better ideas out there, let's hear them. But I'm excited that this was a proposal, and it's not a new proposal. Others have brought it up before, too. But President Trump is intent on moving forward with it. And I think it's time that we give it a try because what has been the Department of Education, it's really, like I said, it's a bad idea and its time has gone. Turn the page. Didn't we hear that during the campaign? It's time to turn the page and let's send it back to the states and have an enthusiasm for bringing about change with vigilance from the voters.
What is your take, irrespective of the dismantling of the Department of Education? What's your view on President Trump's nominee for Secretary of Education, Linda McMahon?
Well, I don't know her. I know of her now because of this. I think, so I can't really opine on it because I don't know much of her background overall. But I think the number one reason why he did select her overall was to begin that dismantling. I do know that she has a background. I think she was an administrator with the Small Business Administration in his first right. term of office. So is very familiar with business practices and strategies. So I'm sure that the message to her was begin the dismantling and return it to the states overall. I look forward to meeting with her. I would, love it if I could talk with her. But I think that she is committed to school choice, and that's something that I look forward to seeing her lead and most likely just work herself out of a job. She's appointed to basically end the Secretary of Education position.
Gloria, Sandra in Queens has a comment regarding charter schools that I'd love for you to respond to, if you're willing, real quick, and then we'll end it there, and then I hope you'll come back. Sandra, what did you want to add to what Gloria Romero was saying?
Well, one, the public schools and charter schools are like apples and oranges. When instead of giving that money to the public schools and helping the teachers, I'm not talking about administrators, with these disruptive children that are causing so many problems within the classroom, you're taking the good students, putting them in the charter schools, and leaving the disruptive kids in the public schools. I'm not saying all of them are, but many of them are. And I wish you would also ask the teachers what they feel is needed.
So let me get Gloria to respond to what you said there, Sandra. Gloria, I've heard what Sandra says time and again. What about this? I've heard it from a lot of teachers who say the same thing. What's your view of what Sandra brought up here?
Well, I would disagree, with all due respect to that observation. I think about it this way. If we know that the students are not reading and they are trapped by zip code, and the state refuses, even though there were federal laws that could be used to transform a school, but nothing was ever done, do we just say, well, golly gee, we just have to leave all of them there? It's kind of like the Titanic. You use the lifeboats that you have to help students get out of a sinking ship. So once again, I would say that I believe in public education. I'm a product of public education from kindergarten through PhD and 2 years of a postdoc. And by the way, my mother had a 6th grade level of education. So I come from very humble background. But that's why I fight for education, because I've lived through it. I've seen what happens. So I would go back to it to say the issue is not about saving the school system. And in a charter school, many of the charter schools, and I'm here in California, there is no different. There's no cherry picking. It's always an accusation that's made that we pick the best ones. But no, it's more so saying, but I think it is one of empowering parents to learn about choices. And once they start learning where they can go, that they're not stuck by zip code, that there are alternatives available, parents will start looking. But if we cut it off and we just say we can't have alternatives because we have to keep the same old system, it's basically replicating the same thing. On the question of teachers, like I've said, I'm a teacher myself, but I would find that there is a great disconnect between the executive boards of the unions that make these decisions and the rank and file teachers. I would say that many rank and file teachers will say, yeah, we need to have greater professionalize the teaching force and basically to reward us on our service and our talents, not just by, how many years have you been breathing on a job. So I think that there's a lot of debate there, but I would still go back to it to say if you give parents choice, the parents will choose. And then the districts need to look at this to say, okay, what am I going to do to basically keep my customers, like any other business, any other, area in American society? It's not just built in saying you're stuck here. In the education system, I mentioned K through 12, higher ed, the only place where kids are stuck by zip code is in K through 12 that is represented by teachers union. Higher ed, college, you're not told you can only go to the college that's closest to your home and you can't go anywhere else. I mean, think about it. Nowhere in American life are we told that except in the school system.
Gloria, I'm going to have to end it there. I really appreciate the time, and I hope you'll come back. I'd love to maybe one day do a full hour with you and a couple of other education advocates. I've learned a lot just talking to you, and maybe we could do sort of an education roundtable, including people who may have different perspectives and different backgrounds. I'd love to do that in the future.
I would as well, and I thank the caller who called in. I'd be happy to continue the conversation with her as well.
Thank you, Sandra. We'll have her back as well. All right, Gloria.
Thank you.
Gloria Romero, I just linked to her op-ed in the Wall Street Journal. If you want to give it a read, you can go to my Facebook page. It's at facebook.com/MoranoFan and give it a read there and share your thoughts. If you want to comment, you certainly can. 646-720-0635. That's 646-720-0635. This is The Other Side of Midnight. Straight ahead.